Hi, it's Jeff, aka Godless Scummer. Welcome to my channel tonight. I have got very great guests on tonight. I'm looking forward to having a conversation with her about this since she's come into the community. So we've been on a number of Dave streams together. I have the wonderful Phoebe J Rose. Phoebe's got an interesting story of at one time being involved with far-right activism within the UK, which she obviously is no longer involved with. So, Phoebe, welcome to the channel.
Hello.
Hello.
You're lumbered chatting with me tonight. Good grief.
Yeah. Oh, you know, well, he's trying to get someone else, but you know.
Yeah, you know, desperate times call for desperate measures, call for desperate people to fill desperate spaces on desperate shows.
Indeed, indeed. There is not many channels more desperate than this one. I can assure you that. So,
yeah,
Phoebe,
Dave's channel.
Yeah. Dave's normally desperate when he's like just sort of texts you like a couple minutes before going live, sort of like, do you want to jump in, help?
Or as it was last night, just jump in when he started.
Yeah. yeah. This is the one thing, you know, we may have had opposite political views at one time or another there, Dave, but Phoebe and I we can both agree to like rag on you for a bit.
See, common enemy and all that shit.
Yeah, it's, you know, so I guess I probably ought to start asking you.
Okay, let me ask you a question. What do you know about me?
Not a lot, really, not a lot until you've you know, until really what I've heard since you entered the community, I suppose. I certainly was not aware of you because, just for context here, just so people understand, I was involved on a few anti-fascist marches back in the day. I got my picture up on Red Watch, but I wasn't aware of you when you were active. I'll put it that way. So I only really I'd say one or two.
Doesn't necessarily mean we weren't active at the same times. It just
Yeah,
meant we didn't quite fall in the same circles.
We may have crossed paths and not known it. I don't know.
You may not have known me as this name, or you may not have known me as this identity, shall we say?
Yeah, and we won't go into identities.
It's a whole
but
different can of worms, that is.
Oh, indeed. So, so I guess I perhaps ought to, you know, start with start at the beginning. How did you? Let's just say, sort of when and how did you get involved with far right politics?
I never saw it as politics. I always saw politics as the boring shit that men in suits that sat in a castle in Westminster did. It was something that wasn't something that I could connect with. I didn't see it as politics, what I was doing. I saw it as, what's the word I'm looking for? I saw it as a necessity.
Okay.
Saw it as essentialism. I saw it as what was needed. As I always saw politics and politicians as the problem. You don't want them. You want real people doing real things, not overpaid fat cats and out-of-touch suit-wearing idiots. So I look back on it, and of course it was politics, what I was doing. What you call it in the moment is something different. And I got involved late 15, early 16. 2015, 2016. Not 1915, 19. I'm not that old.
So I've got a feeling probably at the time when I was most active, might have been before that. So I sort of
may have known people like Ivan Humble then, who was much more active at the time.
Yeah, I didn't know him by name then. I'm aware of who Ivan Humble is now. Actually, funny enough, via Jeff Scoop, because what I said before we came live, the last person I interviewed was Jeff Scoop. Obviously, I've had Ed on the channel as well, so I sort of talked to a few people who were once involved with far right politics of one shape or another. I was going to say about you sort of saw it as essential. I guess the question is this one. I don't know. Some of the times when a lot of people get into these conversations, it's the why question. People will ask the how and when you got involved. But I mean, I just, what was your mindset and your thinking at the time?
I believed I was, at the time, my mindset was ethno-nationalism is the best way to describe it. And ethno-nationalism, for those of you who aren't aware of what ethno-nationalism is, but I hope that most of you are aware in this chat, is where you believe in separation of nationalities from one another and superiority of ethnicity. So England for the English, Scotland for the Scottish, Wales for the Welsh, etc. That's ethno-nationalism. And I'm getting an echo and a feedback from your end.
Yeah, I think my headphones are not very.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I need to replace these. I'm trying to sort them out.
I just wondered if there was. I do apologise for. That, but yes, at the time I was practicing Jew. This is when most people start to get very surprised with what I say, because they don't associate Jews with the far right, because they have conflated the far right being a pure Nazi ideology and a Nazi organisation. But this is one of the very one-dimensional ways of looking at the far right. And the problem with looking at the far right like that is that you exclude individuals like myself, who is a very dangerous, very right-wing individual involved in a very dangerous, very right-wing organisation. So when people say to me, "You were a Nazi," I normally do this and wave this around at them, which is my Star of David that I wear.
Yeah.
And people don't generally tend to know how to react to that, because they've assumed that the far right equals Nazis and Hitler worship and all that rubbish. I didn't do that. I was never a Nazi. I never worshipped good old Adolf, as my grandfather used to say, disparagingly.
I'm going to say I'm probably maybe a little less surprised than some of the people that because as I said,
you understood it, because you were the other side.
And you started seeing the St. George's flags and the Star of David flag on English Defence League demos. Now, again, we were trying to, there was a bit of we were trying to figure that out as to, where, this was a bit weird. But I think you realize it was, I suppose, realizing that, this isn't like a traditional, neo-Nazi organization. This is something a bit different. And I think I talked to you a little bit about this before we went online, but when the English Defence League first popped out in around 2008, 2009, there was a bit the initial analysis by a lot of people on the left was that for a long, long time, Nick Griffin of the BNP has been holding back the ones who want to get out on the street. Now he's turned them loose. That was the initial thought, should we say. And it did take us a little while to realise there was something a bit different about the English Defence League, and it wasn't necessarily, it wasn't like a street wing of the British National Party. And obviously, if anyone does know a bit about the British National Party, now I'm not going to say everyone who was ever in that organisation was an anti-Semite, but you started looking at certainly the likes of Griffin, very much a track record with it there, with that and Holocaust denial with him. So especially, yeah, I think it did throw a lot of people when we started seeing like the Israel flags. And so the first time I saw it in person was the English Defence League turned up at something that it was nothing to do with like anti-fascism, but it was a solidarity with Palestine event, and that took place in Southampton. And there was a handful of English Defence League people turned up. I'm trying to think when this might have been about 2015, maybe. I'm thinking, possibly before that. I'm not quite, but I'm thinking it was around about then. And yeah, the first time I actually saw it, that there was, Israeli flags were being flown there. So
yeah, because the thing with the English Defence League is that its sole aim was the elimination and removal of Islam from the UK.
yes, yeah,
Didn't care anything else. So, for those of you who are unaware, I'm a trans woman. So if this is the first time you've ever encountered me, I'm a trans woman, and I'm Jewish, and I was quite prominent within the English Defence League. That's how little they cared about anything other than the elimination of Islam in the UK. Well done, Dave. Well done. Thank you there, Dave.
yeah. I don't know if you've ever talked about that before, Phoebe. You know, I was a bit shocked.
If you've ever checked out any of my content on this platform, it may come as a shock to you. But
yeah,
the English Defence League did not care who you were, and the only glue they were interested in was how much do you want to get rid of Islam in the UK.
Yeah.
The more you wanted to get rid of Islam in the UK, the better, as far as they were concerned. And if you said the right things, well, hey, you're doing well.
Yeah. And certainly, I mean, I noticed that generally the times when the more people got out is if there was something going on in the world to do with radical Islamic, a terror attack or something, like, that's when you would see the most support for the English Defence League. And I think what we became to realize, that sort of what the English Defence League in a certain way was like United Against Fascism always said it's a united front. There was lots of people from the theory behind it was there was lots of people from different sort of political cultures, but we come together on this one particular issue, that we don't want far right or fascist groups. And I will say, probably in reality, even though I do know some like liberals and conservatives that would have been involved, the reality was, a lot of them were probably members of like the SWP or those anarchist groups, or that's probably that was the core, shall we say, of UAF. And I think there was something, you kind of realised that in a way the English Defence League almost kind of mirrored that it was kind of a united front against Islam as the common enemy.
Yeah,
that was how I think I came to understand it to be.
And that's probably a very accurate way of describing it, because the variety of individuals that I met in the organisation had a common cause. And that common cause was, we don't like Islam. We believe Islam is trying to take over this country, and we don't want Islam to take over this country. And that was the unifying glue that held everyone together.
Mm. Yeah. So you've mentioned this. So, I mean, because this, I suppose that comes as a lot of the real big shock to most people is that you were a trans woman in, like, where Like, I know when Ed talked to you, he was quite shocked to sort of hear that, because he's like, and why wouldn't you be if you'd been like in something like Ed or what Jeff Scoop was in, where the idea that they would ever entertain a transgender Jewish woman in their ranks would be like, what, so, but I mean, did you, even though they welcome you, did you get a bit of stick about that, or?
I didn't, because I knew how to use it to my advantage.
Yeah.
Because I'm a very good orator. I'm a very good manipulator of people. And I'm a very good situational manipulator and controller. So I can control a situation very well. I was a propagandist. I wasn't, quote unquote, a foot soldier, end quote. I was one of the people that they would turn to and go, she knows what she's talking about. It was always she. Never misgendered, because they respected me for what I said. And the number of married men that I had affairs with was through the roof. Nerdy, you've been manipulated by me since the day we met. It's too late to only start realising that. But anyway, the number of married men that I had affairs with was quite insane. And it's a lot of fun to get a lot of sex from a lot of different people. It's a lot of fun to be able to hold that over them. Because I didn't care who they told, but they weren't going to tell anyone. But they cared who I told, because they were married and they didn't want it out that they'd shagged someone else. So it's about how you use your own capital within these groups, and about how you hold yourself and how you keep yourself in a way that is A, relevant to yourself, B, relevant to the group, and C, keeps the members of the group idolizing and respecting you. There's very few women at all would get up on stage. And I was one of those women that would get up on stage. And I would have the whole audience in the palm of my hand. The whole audience would be there in the palm of my hand. And I'd be able to do that. And I'd be able to do that. And I'd be able to have them round this little finger like no tomorrow. And I would be encouraging, and I would be having crowds stand up and cheer what I was saying. At some events, I was the main attraction at some of these events. So, back of cricket clubs, back rooms of pubs. I remember being the first woman ever allowed into a certain working men's club, because the organisation had hired it out. And the organisation said, this is our speaker. And the management went, but that's a woman. And they went, here's our money. It's not your event tonight. Fuck off. So they held me in quite high esteem because I said all of the right things. And I knew how to say it. And I knew what to say, when to say it. And that was only a portion of what I would do. The other portions of what I would do would be, I was a very good intelligence source.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense, yeah.
Because I knew where to find material. I knew cities very well. I knew how to get round police blocks. So, for example, in Brighton, I would tell people to come in 24 hours beforehand.
Yeah.
Because police only started with the cordons and stuff on the day. Stay in this hotel overnight, you'll be behind the police lines to start with.
Yeah.
use this route and this route. It's a good escape route. Don't leave by train, leave by bus. Because
Yeah,
they're going to be expecting you to leave by train. If you leave by bus, they won't be expecting it.
I got to say, I don't think it was anyone that I know of on, should we say, our side of the fence that was anywhere near that organised.
We were a very organised group.
Yeah.
And we knew who your organisers were.
Oh, yeah.
And we would single them out. Because we knew as soon as we took your organisers out, the rest of you were not an organisation, but a bunch of people standing next to each other going, what do I do?
Mm.
Whereas we all knew what we were doing. We'd all sat down in small groups and had a plan of what we were doing. These were not spontaneous. These were well-organised, well-oiled, well-thought-out things that we were doing.
Mm.
And we would have scenarios planned out. Well, what if the other side don't turn up and we just get to do the rally? Brilliant! We get to do the rally. Wonderful. If they do turn up and the police stop us, oh well, here's how you disperse around so that the police are worried about where's everyone gone. And when we started to see more of the face-covered, hoodie-wearing, bandana and glasses people,
yeah,
what we did, we imitated that so you would get confused. Because if you saw what you were expecting to be your people with the bandana and the glasses and the hood up, and then you saw our side with the bandana and the glasses and the hood up,
yeah,
could you tell them apart?
I got to say something about, as you say, though, that because there was always division, should we say, amongst the left about. Oh dear, sorry, a bit of a cough there, but
it's coronavirus.
Yeah, probably. But a lot of those ones you saw that got, should we say, in the black masks and everything. I mean, we kind of know. I mean, they're generally from little anarchist groups and so on, and they don't necessarily hold. They were the ones who were real militant, who just wanted to go in there and have a fight a lot of the time. They sort of adapted. There was something I was started in the 70s that by the Anti-Nazi League that at the time that was kind of known as squadding, and it was to have these bit smaller groups, but real militant ones who wanted to go in there and actually go toe to toe with them. Now, to be fair, probably back in the 70s, you probably had the activists who were physically capable of doing that as well. Of really, some of the ones I've seen, so I know, I'm like, I wouldn't, I was like, honestly, I wouldn't fancy their chances in an actual fist fight, really, because, but I think this is the thing, a lot of the people who actually even formed that tactic, the squadding thing, which is, I suppose, in a way, it's a bit like what Antifa do in the US now. But a lot of those who formed that tactic, I think, have even come to realise that it wasn't a good tactic, and sort of denounced it now. Like like the former Anti-Nazi League people and the people who started UAF, and even I think even the Socialist Workers' Party has denounced that now. So. But it was all that was so. This is what I mean. That it was, and I think you were quite rightly pointed out. Our side was not very organised because there was a lot of different, little groups with different little currents and who couldn't agree on shit together. It's kind of amazing that we actually did as well as we did in certain situations.
Now, here's another question: did you ever take legal observers with you?
I think there were some on some of the bigger rallies. If it was like, I mean, I do know. I mean, I think that happened after a while, because I think that one of the early ones at Bolton, two sort of most notable people who were involved with UAF at the time have been Wayman Bennett and Martin Smith, and less said about Martin Smith the better, because things that came out about him later on. But those were the sort of two guys at the time. But that they got arrested like the moment they showed up on a demo. It was like almost preemptive because. So it was. I think after that they were like, yeah, we probably need act. There was a bit more emphasis, shall we say, on legal observers and so on.
Because we always took them, no matter where we went. If it was a sanctioned EDL rally, we would always have a list of legal observers that were with us.
Yeah,
and we would always supply that list of names of our legal observers to the police beforehand.
Yeah,
and we would always get a permit. And we would always inform the police, yes, we are rallying today. Yes, we are going to be here. Yes, we expect this number of people. Yes, we will have legal observers there. Yes, we will have our own first aiders there, etc. This is our planned route and everything. And we would tell the police in advance. And there's a good reason why we'd do that. Because if we played by all of their rules, it made it harder for them to stop us. It made it much harder for them to stop us, and much easier for us to turn around and say, well, who the hell are these people?
Yeah.
Who are they? What are they doing here? We didn't invite them. Have they told you they're counter-protesting us? Have they said this? Have they said that? Have they got this, that, and the other with them? And in some cases, at some of the really big rallies, we even had insurance.
Yeah.
We even had insurance. Public liability insurance for the event taking place. That's how organised we were as a group.
Yeah, that's what I mean. When historically they'd had, should we say, the far right groups in the UK that were out on the streets, historically have not been that organised, and really until the EDL, I think. And this is what I mean. I think people forget how successful, and how much, really how dangerous the English Defence League was at one time. And I think this is a real, it's a real lesson learned here, because in the past, you had I think probably the two best groups that were ever that well organised in the past were probably the National Front in the 70s, who were openly sort of neo-Nazi, which was very different from the English Defence League, and obviously the British Union fascist back in the 30s. Now, I did read somewhere, but I've yet to corroborate this, that the EDL at their height got bigger demos than even Mosley managed to do in the 30s. Now, I've not managed to corroborate that historically, but
it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah. Oh.
I say it definitely wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Oh, hello.
Sorry, I think we're having a little internet
You've leaned in like
problem here.
Wrong.
Yeah, hold on. Let me try.
My end or your end?
Okay, is that better? I hope that's worked.
It's all fine. I'm not. My internet's not registering any problems because my internet normally shouts at me.
Yeah.
And I've got my wired internet, and I'm also on my tether as well. So
yeah,
I shouldn't really have any problems. So I don't think it's my end.
Yeah, it's probably.
But
I
yes,
think
getting
it's.
Back,
yeah. Go on, Phoebe. Sorry.
But yes, getting back to what I was saying, it's probably something. It wouldn't surprise me if there were bigger EDL, right? Because you have to remember that whilst the EDL may have declined, what it did show is that there was an appetite for it when you had the Free Tommy Robinson stuff.
Yeah.
There was still an appetite for it. There was still organisation there. And with the Free Tommy Robinson stuff, is they were coordinated, organised, well-developed, legal, insured rallies in central London. The police knew they were taking place because they'd said to Westminster Council, we're going to march here. They didn't go within the Parliament Square exclusion zone for very good reasons. They went to Downing Street, not Parliament Square, because Parliament Square has the Serious Organised Crime Act exclusion zone around it, which says you cannot protest there. So we didn't go there for the Free Tommy Robinson stuff. We went to Downing Street, which is by the Cenotaph, which is fine.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I've been on like marches that have been into Parliament Square, but I'm aware of the legalities around that. I mean, I don't just as a little side note, the irony is that one of the reasons they brought that particular act in was to get rid of that anti-war protester that had been camped out there
He
for.
lived there. He
lived there. He'd been camping out there for a couple of years. So this is one of the things they hoped to do, and then they found out that wasn't fit for purpose, so they couldn't move him, which was quite.
The reason it wasn't
funny.
fit for purpose is because it was classified an ex post facto law, and it was illegal under the European Convention of Human Rights.
Yeah.
And the thing that a lot of people didn't understand with the EDL is that they were prepared to use the laws they campaigned against.
Mm. Oh, yeah.
So equality laws. So the Equality Act of 2010 prohibits discrimination on certain grounds.
Yeah.
And those grounds that allow you to be discriminated against under those laws, you have to be very, very, very extreme.
Mm.
You have to be a Stalinist organization. You have to be a Nazi organization. You have to be that level of totalitarianism.
Yeah.
And every time somebody used to threaten the EDL with something under the Equality Act, the EDL would say, well, okay, we'll see you in court.
Mm.
We would invite the person to take us to court. I know of times when the police said, well, we're going to enforce these sections of the Equality Act, and people in the EDL said, well, okay, we'll see you in court. We'll challenge you in court. And the police never went through with those because the police didn't want the precedent if they lost.
Yeah.
And if the police lost, it made their life harder, and it made the police look stupid. And if the police won, it just got more people onto the side of the EDL because it was free advertising.
Yeah. So I guess I'll ask you this, because I asked Jeff Scoop this very question actually. Actually, before I do that, actually, I'm going to put these other headphones on because I'm just hearing from the chat. It's roboting like hell from my end, so I'm just going to try and. Yeah. Okay. That should be better. You can hear me, okay? Can you, Phoebe?
I can hear you. Can you hear you?
Brilliant. Yeah, that sounds so much better. I think these are done. I'll have to get some new ones. These are done, I think. I've been just hearing from the chat that it's roboting like hell. So, okay. So, yeah, where were we? Actually, I was glad you brought Tommy up, actually, because
Mr. Yaxley Lennon. Mr.
Yeah.
Stephen Yaxley Lennon is his.
Now, when you started, was he? Yeah. When
not officially.
Oh, no.
The answer
Okay.
to your next question. Not officially.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't know
the reason
why.
Not officially is because he had been convicted of a number of offences.
Yeah.
So therefore, trying to run an organisation from inside, whichever Her Majesty's pleasure he was at, was not possible.
Mm.
And the reason that the EDL took so long took so much effort to be legal was because we knew the police would try, and we knew that the other side would bring private prosecutions, would make complaints, and would try any means they could to try to disrupt us through legal means.
Mm.
So we were intentionally overly legalistic, and we were intentionally thorough with how we went about it.
Mm.
And that's one of the things that a lot of people don't actually realise, is that in England especially, not so much in Scotland, but in England especially, England and Wales, you can be a very distasteful individual and the police can't touch you.
Mm.
You can hold very distasteful rallies that will offend a lot of people and the police can't touch you. An example of this is the individuals who were rallying in support of the Tamil nationalists in Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
Now, Tamil nationalists in Sri Lanka are also known as the Tamil Tigers. And the Tamil Tigers are designated as a terrorist organisation by the government of the UK.
Yeah.
But because they had permits, because they had told the police they were there, because they were there doing it peacefully, they were allowed to do it.
Yeah.
And in England and Wales, you can be a very distasteful individual and you can hold a very distasteful rally, and it is perfectly legal.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess, because I remember where I was going to go now before I had to change headphones. Because I talked to Jeff Scoop a bit about this, and like, because we always, because I guess I really had a lot of reflections, shall we say, on some of the tactics or whatever that we used back in the day. And I mean, one of the things he told, because we were always on this thing that, hey, if we get masses and masses of people out onto the streets, we'll defeat the far right, like what we've done in the past. And Jeff Scoops was like, no, we loved it when the anti-fascists came out. We loved it. As was it very much a similar sort of thing?
Oh, good God, yes.
Yeah,
the reason we liked it is because threefold. First, there were elements that were up for a fight.
Mm.
Second of all, we knew that we could paint the anti-fascists as throwing the first brick.
Yep.
And third of all, we knew we would win because we knew we were a lot more bloody organised.
Yeah. I mean, I will say I do know some time. There was a few times where on the, so we say the where there was a smaller one in Southampton or whatever, where I think which I think was by the English Defence League standards was pretty disorganised, because it was called on a fly as a response to something the left was doing, and they did get into a punch up with some of the left wing activists and got their fucking asses handed to them. But I did one thing I did notice, and early on, that a lot of these were young lads on the EDL. So the one guy who looked like he knew what he was doing and organised it was stood at the back, and he was the one. He was wearing a Millwall division shirt.
The Football Lads Alliance.
Yeah, but this was the EDL Millwall division or whatever. He looked like he was the one who was coming down and organising it. He stayed right back away from any of the fighting.
Oh,
and
yeah. You wouldn't have caught me anywhere near the fighting.
Yeah, I picked him out. I thought, okay, this guy is he's staying well back. He was clearly the one who was organising this particular rabble. I mean, they were a rabble that day. And and again, that was more, I think, about the police. There was it only ended up that way because there was some pretty bad policing on that particular day. But because one of the things what happened was one time when there was a big thing in Southampton, and like I said, there was I mean, whenever they turn up in Southampton, it always seemed to be very small demonstrations, and we'd always be outnumbering them 3 or 4 to 1. It was but we always would advise people when the demonstration ended to leave in groups. Do not flipping go away by yourself, and make yourself an easy target, kind of thing.
Yeah. The thing that we always told people was always wear multiple layers. Because the first thing that you do when you're finished is you peel off your top layer.
Yeah.
You lose a hoodie. You lose a hat. You stick a hat on. You change your t-shirt.
Yeah.
And the other thing that was noticeable when comparing the EDL to the opposition, shall we call them, was that the opposition would just scatter, as if they would just scatter. Whereas if you knew who you were looking for, you'd see EDL people that had been at the protest waiting at a bus stop, walking down to a taxi rank, not just in dribs and drabs wandering off, but in a fairly organised way, going about what normal people in the city would be doing, blending in with everybody else, because that made it that much harder to be targeted by the opposition and the police, because the police expected us to go after the other side.
Yeah.
And expecting us to go after the other side was the worst thing they could do, because we knew they were going to do it. So we just said at the end of the rally, go to the pub.
Yeah. And this the irony of it is, as I said, you had some militants on our side who were probably the ones who really wanted to go in there and get after the English Defence League, you know, and they were the ones you could see them a mile off with the black hoodies and the glasses and all, that, and the masks. You could sort of just tell them apart really straight away. But
you can spot them at 1,000 paces.
Yeah, they're not exactly. I mean, the reason I think they do it is something like the anarchists started doing or something. But I think a lot of it was to do with just like obviously masking themselves to like CCTV and whatever. But I'm like, if you get picked up by the old bill, they're going to identify you either way. It's not a you know, it's not of that. It's a.
The other thing is that a lot of those people are fairly ugly people.
Yeah.
They are fairly ugly people, so they're probably just doing society a favour and, you know, hiding the ugly.
If we are going down that route, I'm not saying that you didn't exactly have a lot of lookers on your side back in the day.
No, but here's the thing, though. We didn't give a toss.
Yeah.
We didn't give a toss.
Yeah.
Then you had real lookers like me, though, that were there. So, you know, balances itself out.
Yeah. I mean, I got to actually say that the first time I actually, I can't remember which rally this is on, but I remember seeing Tommy Robinson in person. I don't know why, I was just amazed how fucking short that bloke was. Because there was a picture of him, I just thought he was, you know, just the way he'd been taking pictures and that. And I just thought, God, he's a little poison dwarf. I was just like,
I'm considerably taller than him.
I could believe it. I think he's only about 5'6", 5'7", if I'm guessing. I was shocked how small of a guy he is.
Yeah, I'm considerably taller than he is. But the way to look at the way that the rallies were organised was, we always ridiculed the way you organise your rallies. We would always ridicule you. And these would be like me meeting down with the mates down at the pub. Because I was never actually involved in the minutiae planning ingrained with the group going to all the different things. Because we actually had members who were in the legal profession that would do that for us. We had people who were solicitors that would liaise with the police. And yes, there were members of the police that were also in there that would be friendly and push through things that, we'll speak to Mr. Smith over there, Officer Smith speaking to Mr. Bloggs over here. They will both already met each other. But if it's in an official report already, then it's in an official report already. And the scary thing looking back on it is, if individual civic society can be as organised as what I was involved in, why is it so difficult for there to be organised, evidenced organisation from the government itself, from authorities itself? Because we always thought we were filling the void left there. And it was something that should never have been allowed in the first place, because we always believed that there was a void left by the authorities. And I still believe that void is still there from the authorities. There is still a large disconnect between those in charge and the concerns of the average Joe. And we always saw ourselves as raising the concern of the average Joe, which is why you got elections of some very distasteful individuals in the late 2000s, early 2010s. You
Yeah.
had some incredibly distasteful people in very powerful offices. Richard Barnbrook on the London Assembly, Andrew Bronze and Nick Griffin in the
MEPs, weren't they? Yeah.
MEPs. The English Democrats winning their mayoralty in Doncaster.
Yeah.
These were things that really shocked the establishment because these things weren't meant to happen. It was at a time of economic strife. It was at a time of political disengagement with what had been seen as the steam running out of the Labour Party.
Yeah.
And Britain was still trying to get over September the 11th. Madrid,
77, obviously, yeah.
June the 7th. Our involvements in Kosovo, Iraq, and Afghanistan, and Sierra Leone for that matter. We were still trying to get over those as a country. And there were a lot of people that I associated with at that time that were very disturbed by the nature and journey that the country was going in. And they genuinely believed that the threats were from Islam.
Yeah.
And it wasn't something that was a ridiculous position. It was an incorrect position, but it wasn't a ridiculous position. When you see terrorism in the name of being repeated, when you see British troops dying in the defense of the country at the hands of people who called themselves Muslims on a regular basis, because in Iraq at points there was at least one death or serious injury a day being reported back home.
Yeah.
And Royal Wootton Bassett, as it now is, was a focal point because there was a very deep trauma within the UK of what was A, going on in society, and what B, Britain had entangled itself in. And to forget those things is to forget the origins of where this came from. Because it didn't come from nowhere. Because the EDL weren't around in the 1990s when Islam was still a thing.
Yeah. I mean, really, the 1990s was, probably the biggest thing that actually, I think you sort of, the 1990s were a bit weird because you sort of had I think you gradually, there was still obviously tensions from Northern Ireland, but there was the peace process was starting there. But one of the biggest sort of terrorist things that actually happened in the UK in the 1990s was David Copeland, who was a far right guy, the nail bomber.
Yeah,
who was a far right guy. He I think at one time he'd been a steward for the BNP. He wasn't when he did the. To be fair, I was going to say
he had been expelled from the BNP.
He'd been actually kicked out, so I've got to be actually, because I do see a lot of people on the left actually say he was a BNP member when he did that. Like, actually, no, he wasn't. He'd been actually kicked out. So I just, and I'm not defending the BNP here, but I'm just saying we've got to be intellectually honest. Yeah, be honest about this,
Because the other thing is when people would say that the British National Party used Red Watch. The British National Party explicitly forbade using Red Watch. It explicitly forbid it. And the EDL expressly forbid using Red Watch because it was seen as nothing but a violent cesspit that we wanted nothing to do with, A, for public opinion reasons, and B, because it was very distasteful, actually, to what we were trying to achieve. Because it was just violence for the sake of violence. And a lot of people found that quite distasteful. It may be a shock for people to hear that, but it was something that was found to be quite distasteful, being violent for the sake of being violent.
Yeah.
Because violence with a justified cause, it's fine. But violence for the sake of it, yeah, you'd have some people, but a lot of people were like, really? You want violence for the sake of it? Which is why you had such revulsion, particularly amongst some ranks of the EDL, when you were talking about the London riots. Because they saw it as violence for the sake of violence, and that was the last thing they wanted, was violence for the sake of violence.
Yeah. It's I mean, I think it's weird thing is with a lot of what you were talking about is, I think in a way, a lot of what happened in Britain, because I think it kind of there was people who got radicalized on both sides as well, during the two, especially around the Iraq War.
Yes.
But it may have, and with a lot of the things you were talking about, but then, okay, you had, but then it was a lot of the time, I suppose it's where they would put the blame. A lot of people probably went to the right, saw this is a result of Islam or whatever, and then you had people who would say that this is a result of the politicians, the ruling class, that kind of thing. So they were going to go to the left, but weirdly, probably the anger and frustration comes from a similar place.
Oh, absolutely.
And
it's a sense of disillusionment, disenfranchisement, and detachment.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess a good gets us down. I know you've talked about this before, but what was sort of the process of you starting to leave and come away from the English Defence League? And because we should make this clear, you were out. You do not support that ideology anymore.
A long way out.
Long way out, and yeah.
Well, I can tell you how far out I am. It's when you know you're out when people used to associate with essentially death threats.
Yeah.
You know you're out then.
Yeah. And this is the thing is, that's you're out, and there is no going back at that point.
Absolutely.
Because this again, as I said, I've had Grumpy on. We've talked about this, and obviously I talked about this with Jeff Scoop. I mean, it can be a brave thing coming out of like the fight, especially if you're someone who then goes on to actually speak out against it. I mean, people
this is the safest thing I can do.
Yeah.
Because the more people who know me, the harder it is to kill me.
Yeah.
The more prominent I become, the more difficult it becomes. Because it becomes more high profile. It's not an unknown killing an unknown.
Yeah.
So I come on shows like yours. I come on other shows. I run my own show, not on extremism or far right issues, but on different issues, partly for my own personal safety. And a lot of people think that's turning the system on its head. But it's actually one of those things where, A, I'm doing something good every day. And every day I want to make it a better day for everybody.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how many more tomorrows I could have anymore. Because if one of these people do decide it's time for you to end and they are successful, I won't have a tomorrow. And that's something I live with. But it's something I've embraced because I've decided that... Be careful what you wish for,
Ox. Yeah, I get the joke, but damn. Don't be offended, Ox. I'm not putting that on screen.
That's not going on screen. That could be misinterpreted.
Yes. I get that you meant that as a joke, but yeah, that could really be seen another way.
It really could on a stream like this by certain individuals.
Yeah.
So I choose to live every day fighting this stuff.
Yeah.
I choose to live every day prominently and say what I did was wrong back then, but I can't change who I was.
Yeah.
And the thing that annoys me the most is when people say that my past defines my present and my future. It doesn't.
I'm going to say, because I had this with, and I've seen it, and I've seen this as well, because I had this conversation with Ed and with Jeff when I spoke to them. And it's one of the big things I feel frustrated with for people on the left or whatever who have that attitude. I mean, the quote I hear quite a lot is the "once a Nazi, always a Nazi," and I've heard that from people that are on the periphery of our own community. Some of us know, some of us, in our own community have interacted with them, and I'm like, that's just a ridiculous position to take.
I'll tell you what that position is. That position is fascist.
Yeah.
The only way to describe a position like that, it is a fascist position, because it is a totalitarian position that says that it is acceptable to ignore the person in front of you and ascribe characteristics that they no longer hold, simply based on your own beliefs of what you believe.
Yeah. And
the thing that must be done in this day and age, you cannot fight fascism with more fascism.
No.
Fascism is not something exclusive to the right. Fascism happens on the left as much as it does on the right. And anybody that says that fascism does not happen on the left does not understand what fascism is.
Yeah, maybe personally, I don't know. I would characterize it that way, but I can't necessarily disagree with what you said there. I mean, there is just fucking extremist dogma I've seen on the left. It's unreal. But one thing I hate about that attitude is, I said I've seen this coming from people who are, I'm not going to mention names, but I'll just say should we say, in the atheist YouTube sort of circles. And I'm like, well, how many people do you know in this community who have come from a religious background, like a fundamentalist religious background, or who were in a cult at some time or another? Now, we treat people who come out of of fundamentalist religion, or or come out of cults, with a lot of compassion and charity. We've got to treat people who have come out of extremist ideologies, with the political ideologies, with the same charity and compassion. And in some ways, because people, as you've said, it's a huge risk to a lot of people, and this is why I kind of was interested in what Jeff was doing. When I spoke to him, trying to form little communities of for people who were in that, so they have a safe place to land when they come out of this. It is, but it's just something that you get what I'm saying, Phoebe. Why this frustrates me,
because fascism is for centralized authoritarian autocracy.
Yes.
Doesn't matter what form it takes, it's for centralized authoritarian autocracy. Stalin was a fascist. Hitler was a fascist. Kim Jong-un is a fascist. Because they are all centralized, autocratic, authoritarian dictators at the head of a centralized, authoritarian government which imposes its own centralized, authoritarian views without question, without acceptance, without any dissent, without any freedom to challenge. And that is the central core that needs to be avoided here. Because you have to understand that the person in front of you is still a human. I'm a human, you're a human, everyone in that chat is hopefully a human and not a bot. Except for maybe Ox. We're not quite certain on Ox yet. But yeah, the dehumanization of the other side is the problem. And when you dehumanize the other side, you can justify yourself getting away with more. And that's where we need to draw the line. I
think I totally agree with that. I did say I was only going to go about an hour, and I really do think that was a good note to sort of wrap up on, really, because you know, as a so I just want to say, you got anything you'd like to plug? I put the link to your
Plug
channel
my
in.
channel.
I
My
also
channel is
say
awesome.
I
I'm
put
awesome. So's my ego. So's my channel.
yeah. Now somebody did put it in there earlier. Where is it? I think it may have been Dave or Math Pig put it in there, but it is in the
That'll be a
description
math
to
peg.
this. Let's go and get, because what are you at, about 65 or so
I'm at about
subscribers?
65 on the YouTube. I'm nearing 1,000 on the Twitbox. So there you
So
go.
let's get Phoebe. Let's get Phoebe to 100 on YouTube. That's a very reasonable thing to
Get me to
to
1,000 on the Twitbox. If you're not following me
and,
on Twitter, why are you here? Go follow me on Twitter. Do that as
yeah,
well.
cool.
But
So
yes,
yeah,
that's what I do. I do a lot of work to try to better myself. I do a lot of work to try to better the world around me. And I thank you for letting me tell a different side of my story that I haven't told before. Because I've told the sides of how I got in, how I got out, etc.
yeah. Well, this is
But
again,
to
it's
tell
like
a
I said,
slightly different side of
yeah.
it was quite refreshing.
This is where I thought maybe we could have a bit of an interesting dialogue, because I said we were on I mean, you could always say this is like two former adversaries having a come together, and so you know, I'm going to say thank you for coming on, Phoebe. This has been an
Oh, you're more than
amazing
welcome.
conversation. I'm just trying to. I think MathPeg's got something coming up in about an hour or so. So go and check out that. Otherwise, this has been Jeff, aka Godless Scummer. I'll see you all later. Take care. Salute.